Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's Full Press NFL Sunday. Yes, that's right. It is October the 9th, 2022. Week 5 is actually currently underway as we have the Packers and Giants playing across the pond over in London. And for those of you that actually live over there, probably sick of me saying that stupid phrase that probably no one ever says over there. Kind of like, clam chowder and park your car. Those type of things that people never say in Boston, but everyone tries to replicate, when they're trying to mimic them. Braden, let me ask you, what do people say about people in Missouri in that area that isn't really true, but, generally is a stereotype?
Oh man. It's hard to think of ones I guess that aren't true. I think people say ope a lot around here. I think uh that's something that's always kind of joked about. Like ope, I'm gonna sneak right by you real quick. That's kind of a stereotype. I think that's thrown around, but I have a hard time thinking of one that's not true.
Yeah, well, I know one of them that's going around is that the Kansas City fan base, Chiefs fan base, is one of the most craziest fan bases in all of the league, and I can't assume that anyone's going to be able to dispute that. Rightfully so. I mean, look, success breeds quite a bit of excitement, and certainly Kansas City is the place to be when it comes to excitement in the NFL. So, but they don't play till Monday. They got a big Monday night football game against the 1-3 Las Vegas Raiders. So coming off a big win or in desperate need of a win, the Raiders will look to try to double that up this week against the Chiefs. But no, we're talking about Sunday, and we're talking about obviously right this moment. The Packers right now, I believe it's 14-3 is the lead. I think they just scored a touchdown. Mercedes Lewis just a few minutes ago caught a touchdown pass from Aaron Rodgers. So they seem to be going pretty well over there. Did you know this is the 32nd game in London, and it's the first time that two teams with a winning record have faced off in London? That's
Yeah,
pretty wild.
that's crazy. Just thinking about how many, like, I think the Packers were the last team to go over there for the first time. So to think that almost everyone in the league has been over there, and there's been a lot of losing teams is pretty crazy. I guess maybe thinking of the schedule makers, some years maybe they're trying to keep some of those teams they expect to be in the Super Bowl from going over there, or maybe that was the original thought, kind of keep those teams more cush and more at home, but. That seems to kind of be changing a little more now as we continue to have more of these games over in London.
Well, and when you're trotting out the Jaguars every season, you're pretty much guaranteed that one of those teams is not going to have a winning record. Although, as fate may have it, they're actually a pretty good team this year, and would actually probably be a pretty good a product across in the United Kingdom. So. But yeah, we're going to be monitoring that game, and I apologize. It's actually 17-3. I knew I was off there somewhere. I was trying to prepare for the show, pay attention to the game, and I knew that a Mercedes Lewis touchdown was scored. But it is 17-3 Packers heading towards the first half. So we've had one game so far being played this week, and that is the Broncos losing in a once again a very, very puzzling, just inept offensive performance. Obviously Russell Wilson is getting a lot of criticism, and look, I've been on the criticize Russell Wilson train for quite some time. I mean, this goes back not just these first few weeks. I just didn't do it when it started to become popular, but I talked about this a little bit on FPC radio because, again, I feel like we're seeing this happen, and we see it on the positive side of things. I talk about it with Patrick Mahomes all the time. Everything he does is the greatest thing that's ever happened, and it's never happened before. And it takes what should be some, excitement out of watching him play and puts it over the top. Now we're seeing that a little bit with Russell Wilson because, yes, his play deserves criticism. He has not been good. I've kind of criticized his play for a while now, again, not just these last few weeks. And whether I'm right or wrong, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I could be wrong, but that's what I've been talking about for a while. And now we're seeing some of those same talking points, but I feel like it's starting to go over the top. We've seen rants about his off the field life and how it equates to his play on the field and this, that, and the other. Like, look, I do believe that he's a bit of a, I don't know. He's kind of phony. Again, I've always criticized you don't need to tell me you train 18 hours a day. No one believes that. You don't have to tell me you watch 3 times as much film. And I feel like he's, through the media hyping him up, and this is what happens. The media hypes you up and then tears you down. Through that hype, he kind of started to believe in it. So I think that, everyone has an ego, and I think his just might have taken control a little bit more. That's fine. Going as far as talking about his marriage and his home life and how, all this stuff that just seems like, why are you ranting and raving about that? It feels like it's too personal. And I'm speaking about a couple people, one in particular on one of the NFL national shows that really just kind of laid into Russell Wilson. And like, look, I will take every opportunity in the world to criticize Russell Wilson, and I will continue to do so because I don't think he's playing well. But even I have to defend him a little bit because I feel like now people are jumping in on it because it's the popular thing to do. And this is exactly what happens on the flip side when it comes to excitement. Like, oh my God, this play was made. We've never seen this before. And everyone from social media jumps in on it when the reality of it is like, yeah, we've probably seen stuff like this before. We don't have to get over the top every single time. And this is what's happening with Russell Wilson. So is it fair to criticize this play? Absolutely. Go for it. Going overboard and talking about his personal life and then making it sound personal on your end, like he somehow offended you with this performance. Now, to be honest, I was kind of offended watching Thursday Night Football. That was pretty bad. But again, you know what I'm saying. Like it feels like it's going a little bit over the top, and they're focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is I think just kind of looking at how this Broncos team, how they've kind of performed in recent seasons as well. It's definitely not all on Russell Wilson. I mean, this is a team that hasn't made the playoffs since they won Super Bowl 50. I think most of their coaching staff is pretty inexperienced in terms of how long they've been, coaching at the NFL level. So it's definitely not all on Russell Wilson. This is an offense that's had many different receivers kind of come and go over recent years. A lot of injuries to their top guys. Tim Patrick already out this year, and Cortland Sutton's dealt with a lot in the past. So it's definitely not all on him. I think in terms of just when you talk about stuff off the field, it's really kind of interesting to see how many former Seahawks teammates have kind of come out and kind of dusted off the dirty laundry. But I think the biggest thing for Russell is that he's still kind of willing to kind of still be this leader that he portrays, and I think that Denver will still be kind of better off because of that, even if they struggle the rest of this season.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the fact that former teammates, like you said, I mean, it's not just one player. It's been a few players that have kind of, whether it's direct comments or subtle comments, they've said these things about Russell Wilson. And look, we're not in the locker room. Most of the people that are opining about all this have never been within 100 feet of the locker room. But look, I mean, I'm sure there's been some animosity between the two groups. I know certainly after the Super Bowl runs, there was always that tension between, at least what was reported on the tension between the offense and defense, because the defense felt like they were catering to Russell Wilson too much. And we've kind of seen that since, they shifted to more of a focus on the offense, they haven't been able to replicate that success. Although I don't know how sustainable that defense would have been over the long term, because I feel like, teams eventually would figure it out, and they were, straight up cover 3 defense. And I mean, they were great, but, again, eventually talent wanes, injuries happen, and, you can't just run that defense with just any players. You need that talent. And, again, I think Russell Wilson certainly deserves some criticism. And now there's this, this injury news about a torn lat. And look, I'm not going to say I don't believe it, but I don't know. I mean, like, Sure, he can say he has a torn lat, and what are we going to do? Say no, and then we're like, all right, well, what are you accusing him of faking it? No, I think it's a convenient way of alleviating some pressure, and maybe he is banged up, but again, we hear about quarterbacks being banged up all the time. So, how serious is it? What's the issue? We'll find out. But in terms of football, this Denver team is like, we talked about it before the season. I didn't pick them to make the playoffs, so I wasn't really that high on them to begin with, but I thought they were going to be better than they have been. And despite their record, I feel like they've won in spite of Russell Wilson, who, like I said, I mean, all seriousness is all joking aside, like he has not been good this season. And I think that's a huge problem with a Denver team who, isn't tightly wound, in terms of defense and other areas of the offense. Like they have some issues, and they were hoping Russell Wilson would be the great equalizer. That's what great quarterbacks do. They take your issues, because every team has issues. The teams that are constantly competitive have great quarterbacks that negate those issues, or at least make them so non-important because of what they can do on the field. And we know which teams those are. Denver has those issues, but they don't have they think they have a great quarterback. They're certainly paying, or will be paying, as if he is that great quarterback. And I just don't think he is. Doesn't mean they can't win games with him. I just don't think he's certainly good enough, especially at this age, to elevate that team right now. Thoughts, concerns, comments?
Yeah, I guess it kind of just goes back to the whole let Russ cook thing. I think just being able to hide the weaknesses that they did while he was in Seattle. I just don't think Denver has that kind of, you mentioned the issues that every team has. I just don't think the talent is necessarily in place right now for Denver. I think they got worse defensively this offseason, especially in the front seven. Justin Simmons not being healthy right now is obviously a big part of that as well in the secondary. But I just think the talent of this team got worse from last year, and I think those limitations is just it's just a lot more glaring right now because they're not really able to get a lot of chunk gains with the running game. Javonte Williams, of course, now injured and out for the season. So I think he's just having to overcompensate a little bit too right now and carry the load a little bit more than what maybe he's been used to recently in Seattle.
Yeah, and like, look, I mean, that's the danger in getting what you want, and maybe all this time, maybe we owe Pete Carroll a little bit more of an apology, because he knew that there was limitations. And again, I mean, I'm not saying that Russell Wilson isn't a really good quarterback. He is. I think we have this difficulty differentiating between elite and really good in this league. And I think everyone thinks there's a lot of elite quarterbacks in this league, but there aren't. My opinion, there's probably three. And two of them are over the age of 38 years old. And one of which is, again, the guy that I criticize quite a bit in Kansas City, but that doesn't mean he isn't of that level, because again, you look across the landscape of the league and everyone's on Josh Allen. And it's like, Josh Allen's great. And I think he's building towards something, but at the end of the day, I'm not convinced that he's going to make that one player this team is going to rally behind. I mean, again, I'm trying to there's a very fine line when we're talking about elite quarterbacks. We are nitpicking to the nth degree. Okay, I'm not like, you're going to sit there and say, oh, well, he did this. And yes, I understand. He's capable of making comebacks. He's capable of driving plays. I'm talking about making the most crucial drive and the most crucial play at the most crucial times all the time. Mm-hmm. And for better or worse, the three quarterbacks that I was alluding to before do it for the most part. Again, they're not perfect. They're not going to do it every single time. But regardless of what you think, and you may criticize this person, this person, this person, but the second any three of those players get that ball, regardless of what's happened in that game, you think, oh God, I hope they don't do what I know they're going to do, even though I just spent the last 3 hours saying that they're not that good. I mean, that's the level of eliteness that I think separates the great quarterbacks in this league, and there's only a few of them, in my opinion, from the rest of the group. Now, the rest of the group's still capable of winning. Matt Stafford, he won a Super Bowl last year. I don't think he's an elite quarterback.
Right.
Russell Wilson, I think Russell Wilson's a better quarterback than Matt Stafford. I think he's more careful with the football. I think they're both a little, they're prone to making mistakes, but Matt Stafford's unfortunately usually end up in interceptions, which I think are, again, that's a huge deal when it comes to trying to win games as a quarterback. So, but I put them in that group, and maybe Josh Allen busts through this season. Maybe Lamar Jackson does the same, because I think those are two guys that are pushing that limit, pushing that tier, but they haven't got there yet. And you'll sit there and say, "Oh, well, Lamar Jackson won an MVP. Great, awesome." There's been a lot of players that won MVPs in this league, so I still need to see the success, and success it's not a coincidence when great quarterbacks win. It just isn't. So yeah, so look, I mean, I look at the quarterbacks across the league. I look at Russell Wilson. I look at Josh Allen. I look at Joe Burrow and Matt Stafford, and I don't know. That's actually probably about as far as I'm going to go. And I look and I'm like, okay, they're not the same quarterback, but I put them in the same tier.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as people want to, and I see it all the time, each and every week, putting guys like it amazes me that people still put Tom Brady in like tier 2 or 3. I mean, 3, I think you need medical attention. 2, you need to speak to someone at the very least. He deserves and will always be tier 1. And again, as much as I'll criticize Aaron Rodgers and I'll criticize Patrick Mahomes, but guess what? You're a fan of a team going up against those guys. You're up by, say, 6 points, and they get the ball with a minute, 10 seconds left. Are you comfortable? No, of course not. So it doesn't matter what's happened in that game. I don't care if Patrick Mahomes is 0 for 25. He gets the ball at the end of the game. I'm like, oh crap, like it doesn't matter what's happened before. Same with Aaron Rodgers, and of course, same with Tom Brady. And anyone who says otherwise is lying to themselves. So you can't say that about Josh Allen. You can't say that about Matt Stafford. You can't say that about Joe Burrow, and you certainly cannot say that about Russell Wilson. So the separation between really good quarterbacks, great quarterbacks, and the elite, that's the difference. And I think that really limits how many quarterbacks are truly elite in this league. And if that rant makes sense, I'll be surprised, because I feel like I went off the rails a little bit there. But I think I also reeled myself in.
Yeah, I just think there's so many people that are always looking to crown that next new thing, and get kind of tired of obviously the guys that continue to get better as they've kind of done it time after time, year after year. So I think it's just I think some of that's media driven too.
Sure.
At MVP voting going into the year, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, especially this year. But so I think that's a big part of it, is obviously the media driven part. But yeah, I think it's just people always looking for that next big thing, and not really waiting on something to develop and something to organically happen in this league. And we see how long it takes some of these guys to get to that point.
Yeah, and again, one of the great examples, and unfortunately, he's kind of associated with this, is Aaron Rodgers. We go back 10, 12 years, and it was kind of the infancy of social media, and so there was still, it wasn't quite what it was today, but the hype around Aaron Rodgers was, almost as on par, if not more, than what we're getting right now with Patrick Mahomes. Now, there's legitimacy to that. Again, I already mentioned those two guys among that tier 1 level. Oh my God, they have the ball. Like I'm literally frightened that this team is just going to do everything possible and still not be able to stop this offense. They're already in that group, but Aaron Rodgers hasn't been back to a Super Bowl in 12 years.
Right.
Like it's not like, in the commentary now, again, I say it a lot on the other show, that Tom Brady's kind of really just kind of screwed up the entire way that we evaluate everything when it comes to quarterbacks. Because he's not the most, like, obviously, Patrick Mahomes is going to have more quote unquote highlights just because of his unique way that he plays the position. Tom Brady, for what it's worth, I think is the most mechanically sound quarterback we've ever seen play, which Well, guess what? That's boring because it's like a robot. So what are people going to latch onto? Well, they're going to latch onto the freaky plays and kind of the like, oh wow, what's going on? But the reality of it is, Tom Brady's efficiency bores people. So
Right.
the greatness kind of gets overlooked and everything like that. But you get that you see what he's done, and now everyone's like, well, of course people can play till they're 45. Well, of course, if so and so were on this team, then they would have won. Like people are talking about, and again, this is where I draw the line of how much I'll praise Patrick Mahomes, then I'll be like, all right, let's pump the brakes, and they're like, oh, he just needs to win 5 more Super. I'm like, do you realize how hard it is just to win 2? And I
Right.
try to impress upon people that the odds of him winning 0 more Super Bowls versus even 3 or 4 are far greater. So, like again, people got to realize it's not that easy to win 5 Super Bowls, considering only 2 players and 1 quarterback have ever done that. Charles Haley being the other player to have won 5 Super Bowls, and only 2 quarterbacks had won 4 as starters. So, it's really screwed up the way we evaluate quarterbacks. So it's like, well, Brady's unathletic, so there's no way that he could do some of these things. Well, again, it's not about necessarily athleticism. It's about smarts in your head. And I think, again, I keep going back to these 3 and how it separates them from the rest of the group, even some of these guys that we think are elite, like Josh Allen. And again, it's not to say that they aren't elite, but also to kind of put in perspective the difference between those 3 and the rest of the group. So this is not a show just about quarterbacks, although generally quarterbacks, just like the game of football, dominate the show about football. We have a lot of, again, last week, Tom Brady, he's been in the news for quite a number of things this past week, but we're not going to talk about any of the things that obviously have no business being talked about on our show. We're going to talk about the comments he made about football in general, and that is, well, there's a lot of bad football being played across the league. And he says this on Thursday, right before we get that game on Thursday. So if any quote has aged incredibly well, it was that one, because at first, people, I'm seeing the quote and I'm like, okay, I understand there's going to be a segment of people that are going to take this as him just being very arrogant. Yeah, sure, maybe it is arrogance, but again, the guy's won 7 Super Bowls. He can say whatever the hell he wants at this point. But the reality of it is, he's right. He's right, because it's like people are like, oh, there's a lot of parity in the league, and we talk about, oh, the AFC West is so deep, and this, that, and the other. What happens each and every year? It's the same damn teams. There's a couple changes, but the reality of it is, the teams that really have a realistic shot of winning are the same teams over and over. It's Kansas City. It's the Patriots / the Bucks. Basically whoever Tom Brady was on. It's the Packers. It's what I mean. It's teams that are ultra talented that have a pretty good quarterback, a la the Rams last season.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, it's it's funny that parity does exist, yes, and I think there is hope for every team because of just the nature of football and how short the season is relative to the number of games other leagues have. But he's kind of right. And look, I look at the schedule this week, and I'm looking at some of these games, and I'm like, how many really kind of grab your attention? And to Kyle's comment, yes, I would agree. Yes, Brady would probably agree that his team would have played pretty poorly at times as well, and I'm sure that was part of his intent in making that comment. But for the most part, the mediocre teams are incredibly mediocre. And this week, I know on paper these matchups, there's not a lot of juicy matchups. Let's put it that way. But who knows? Maybe we can be surprised with some entertaining bad football. That does exist sometimes. So I'll ask you: is there any games that really, say for Kansas City, Las Vegas? Because I think we're obviously looking forward to that game. Is there any game that really just jumps out at the map at you today?
Oh man. I guess for like elite entertainment, like good football, I would probably look towards the Sunday night game tonight with the Bengals and the Ravens, just because
Right.
I think there's just so many different ways that those two teams can win, specifically the Bengals right now. So that game's one that I'm definitely looking forward to, and I think with the Ravens, especially being probably the worst Ravens defense I've ever seen in my life, it's a game where I think these two teams and going back to the teams that can win every year's different. So Joe Burrow was able to beat the Ravens twice last year, but I think this is an even more prime opportunity for him to kind of dominate that defense, given what we've seen and kind of the blown coverages. So with how much Baltimore's done offensively, I kind of look at this game and think Cincinnati, even with as bad as they were the first 2 weeks, they're coming in as the better team right now, and I think they're starting to kind of find their groove that they got late last season.
Yeah, look, I right now I see the Ravens as basically Lamar Jackson. Their defense, you can't count on this on that unit. And look, I've been preaching for a while. It's the tired wired situation. Like tired defense wins championships, wired offense wins championships. And generally, I believe offense is the more influential unit over the course, certainly of a season. However, as much as I don't think defense generally dominates a game, it can certainly lose you a game and lose you a season. And I think the Ravens are prime example number one, because I believe they can go out and beat any team in the league, and they can do so in very convincing fashion. But unless something changes with this defense, I do not see it as a sustainable thing. So maybe they can do it for a week or two, but look, to win a Super Bowl, you're going to have to win like that for 4 weeks in a row. And I'm assuming they're not going to be good enough to get that number one seed. So the Ravens, can they beat any team in the league and do it convincingly? Absolutely. And that's primarily because of Lamar Jackson and how great he is, not only throwing the ball, but his ability to run the ball. I mean, he has the best qualities of every running quarterback in the league. And I think he's by far the best at that, not only just athletically, but also field vision and just the ability to know when and where to go. So, the Ravens are, I'd be interested to see what happens. Mostly, honestly, I think I know what the Ravens are. I don't know what Cincinnati is. Like, are they the team that looked awful the first 2 weeks of the season, or are they closer to the team that made a really nice run to the Super Bowl? Now, neither of us would agree that they're one of the elite tier teams like we were talking about with the quarterback. They may very well become that. We don't know. But right now, I wouldn't put them there. So a return trip to the playoffs, that would be impressive to me. A nice little run there. But I want to find out who the Bengals are, because, like you said, the Ravens don't have a good defense, which means this Bengals offense needs to produce. And if they can't produce against the bad Ravens defense, then I start to think maybe the first couple of weeks aren't a fluke.
Yeah, and I think something that's kind of interesting right now, there's that narrative that even with all the additions they made to the offensive line, it's the offensive line that's kind of been hurting Burrow the most. But I think you look at some of the sacks he's taking and just his inability to kind of keep those eyes down the field. I think he's hurting himself just as much as his offensive line has. So I think that narrative is kind of overdriven, and we just have not seen his weapons produce. Obviously, like you said, like we did last year. I think Jamar Chase and T Higgins, especially right now, you're seeing kind of that coverage spacing go away. There's a lot of routes that I think the Bengals are running right now that are too close together, and it's just kind of a discombobulated mess compared to what we saw at the end of last season for that offense.
Yeah, and again, there's time for this team to get things together. I mean, the division isn't, it's not like this barn burner of a division. I don't think any team is really particularly good. Again, we've already talked about the flaws of the Ravens, the Steelers. I mean, it's the Steelers. I mean, we don't have to really do much more than that. And then the Browns, again, it's a unique team, yes, and perhaps if they can have a good record by the time Deshaun Watson gets back, maybe they become the favorites in the division. I don't know, but right now I'm not banking on the Browns. Even with all that, it's still the Cleveland Browns. So
Right.
Even with their early season struggles, the Bengals certainly have a a decent shot of kind of getting themselves back into it. So, for the sake of the fact that we've just spent a good amount of time talking about this, we're gonna kind of go a little. We're gonna work our way backwards. So we're gonna start, and we're actually gonna pick Sunday Night Football first because again, there's no point in skipping it and then having to come back to it, and then we'll start from the top and do our game picks for the rest of this week because I know you're all excited to get us the hell out of here and off your screen. So. I went ahead and went with Baltimore at home. I think this is again one of those games where I felt last week that John Harbaugh was ultimately the biggest factor in why the Ravens lost, and everyone's like, "No, you have to go for it. You have to go for it." And this is where I think these winning percentage numbers and projections can really fool people. I looked at that game and I saw them, the Ravens, as a team who had just blown a 20-3 lead and had not scored in almost a full half of football. In that situation, you take the points in a tie game. You have to take the points. Like you haven't been able to score. You can't assume that you're going to be able to convert this, and they couldn't. And again, it to me it felt like a big mistake by John Harbaugh. And you know what? If it goes to overtime, it goes to overtime. But at least you have given yourself a shot and have actually done something wise. And I thought that was a mistake. So I do think they come out and play better offensively. Again, this is going to be a Lamar Jackson game, in my opinion, on the national stage, in the spotlight, in a contract year. You're going to see Lamar Jackson have quite the game. So give me Baltimore in this one.
I went with Cincinnati on this one. I kind of expect a lot of points from both teams, but I think I just trust the depth right now with Cincinnati a little more. I believe Rashad Bateman might be missing today's game. So I just think the Cincinnati defense may make more and more stop than what we see from the Ravens in a high scoring game. So I got the Bengals today.
All right. Let's shift back. We're going to go back in time a little bit and go to or back in time, but in the future from when we're actually recording this. The Chargers at the Browns. We just talked about the Browns a little bit and how they're the Browns. The Chargers, again, this is a team that you mentioned it earlier. There's a lot of hype going into Justin Herbert, into the MVP race this offseason. There's a lot of hype in the Chargers in general. And look, I think they're still very clearly the second best team in the AFC West and a team that I actually feel like I can at least project to get better and kind of level things out. I'm not too sure about the Raiders in that division or certainly not the Broncos. So I'm going to take the Chargers in this one. Obviously Herbert, I think, is going to have times, where he makes mistakes, but you're going to be hard pressed to find someone who, again, a guy that could potentially break through that next level, and is certainly on the upper level of that, I guess, tier 2 or the below the 3, as I like to call it. So give me the Chargers on the road in this one.
Yeah, this one's interesting just because the Chargers defense is not very good up the middle, and with Cleveland's running game, I think they can kind of keep this one close, but I just think the Chargers are getting a lot healthier, and I think they're starting to figure some things out offensively. So I like the Chargers. The history of this team of these two teams could probably lead to a pretty crazy and defeating loss at the end, maybe a last second loss for one of these teams, but I'm going with the Chargers here.
Next, we have Seattle at New Orleans. About 5-6 years ago, this would have been one marquee matchup. Not so much anymore. I believe you getting Jameis Winston playing today. I should have probably checked. No, he's he's out again. I mean, not that it's a big deal for New Orleans. I just don't think this team is pretty good. I do know Alvin Kamara is going to be in there. Is Geno Smith going to go off again? Maybe. The Saints defense is all right. So I went with Seattle in this one, but I don't think neither team has any aspirations for Super Bowl glory this season. But this week it'll be Seattle.
Yeah, I didn't really know where to go on this one. I kind of went based off what I think with either defense in this one. So I went Saints. They kind of showed a little bit more, I think, than what I was expecting last week against the Vikings, holding them to some field goals. So I think it might be the defense that makes a difference today, but I'll go with New Orleans.
Next, we have Tennessee at Washington. Yeah, yeah. Your reaction kind of sums up my thoughts on this. It's just kind of like you know, I went with the Titans, but I think they're the better team. But again, two teams that I'm not really high on right now. I think they have a lot of issues that I think might be outweighing a lot of the positives that they have. So give me Tennessee in this one.
Yeah, I'm going Titans as well. Not really a lot to add to this one. I just think you look at both sides of the ball for Washington. I think they're still figuring a lot of things out. So I got to go with kind of that foundation that the Titans have built.
All right, next we have Atlanta at Tampa Bay. Tom Brady is 10-0
Mm-hmm.
against the Atlanta Falcons, including a certain game played on the final day of the NFL season that I'm sure Atlanta fans will not want to hear. He will not be 10-1. He will certainly move to 11-0 in this because look, we saw last week the Buccaneers offense come to life because, well, guess what? They listened to what I have been bitching and complaining about. Throw the ball, use Tom Brady's arm to run your offense. Stop trying to force the run. And look, they put up 31 points the first time their offense actually looked like the unit we've seen the last couple weeks. Give credit where credit's due. They've had a really tough start to their schedule. If you think about the three out of the 4 games that they played, it's been the Cowboys in week 1, the Packers in week 3, and of course the Chiefs last week. So you're talking about certainly 2 Super Bowl contenders and 1 Cowboys team that may not be a Super Bowl contender or certainly not a bad team. So getting the Falcons at home is certainly a nice landing spot and a what do you call it, get right game. And I think they get right here and have a very good day on offense. So give me the Buccaneers, and I say that emphatically.
Yeah, I mean the Brady stat speaks for itself. There's just certain teams, I mean, that just have their number, not really in their favor. So I think this is a Falcons team right now too that's still just trying to figure who's going to be their top guys offensively. We've seen Kyle Pitts not really get utilized much, and of course I think they won last week with like 7 completions. So it's really not a Falcons team that's as good as some of the others Brady's faced. So should be a pretty easy Tampa Bay win today.
Yeah, and a quick update: the Giants in the fourth quarter are approaching midfield, down 20-10. Oh, I'm sorry, in the third quarter. I fast forwarded quite a bit. So no, there's plenty of time for this Giants team to get back into it. And the Packers offense hasn't been as explosive yet this season. Although, like I said before, never count out guys like Aaron Rodgers. So next we have Detroit at New England. What could be potentially a very, very entertaining game and one that you would maybe describe as drunk afterwards because we have Bailey Zappi making his first start for the Patriots in their throwback uniforms, which I'm excited for, against a team that is incredibly explosive on offense, but equally as explosive or I don't know, whatever you want to call it, on defense. So could we see a wild game where each team scores 30 points? I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I'm going to go with a homer pick, and I'm just going to go with the Patriots in this one because I think the Patriots have – I don't think any team in the league so far has made more costly errors within a game. Like, they don't make – I mean, they make relatively – I mean, certainly more than what they used to, but it's not like they're making like they're outpacing every team with turnovers. No, it's just the ones that they've made have been so costly that I mean, it seems like everyone has had so much hinging on it. I feel if they can clean that up, this team can win some games, and maybe this is a game that even with a couple mistakes, they can overcome it and win. So give me the Patriots in this one, and I'm hoping we get like 70 combined points in this game.
Yeah, when you asked me which game I was kind of looking forward to, I was thinking about this one, but this one, like you said, could get kind of drunk and kind of wild. I think Jared Goff is really kind of flying under the radar right now with what he's been doing, but I'm going Patriots in this one just because I've been really impressed with their defense. Some of their rookies, I think it was Jack Jones. I think I got it right. Last
Yeah,
week.
there's a lot of Joneses on that team, so I get them mixed up all the time. They're so.
Yeah, I've been impressed with that defense, so I think that'll kind of be the difference today. And what I'm hoping is an entertaining game. So I'm going Patriots.
And just like that, the Giants at the 31-yard line, just driving down the field, 2nd and 5. Just like to see maybe the upset. Maybe the Giants are for real. Brian Daboll, Daniel Jones, another Jones. But all right, next we have Miami at the Jets. Obviously, Teddy Bridgewater getting the start for the Dolphins. I don't necessarily think that's a terrible loss or a difference in talent. I mean, I'm not trying to knock on Tua here, but I think certainly, assuming Tyreek Hill is healthy, he did pop up on the injury report this week. If he's pretty healthy, I think this offense should be just fine against a Jets team that, they'll have their moments, but they're not really a great team right now, or, who knows what's going to happen. But give me Miami on the road.
Yeah, it's just so hard to think that the Jets could win 2 games in a row, and even with that win last week, it took some tip balls and some interceptions and some kind of trick plays by their offense to get it done. So even with the quarterback change to Teddy Bridgewater, I just think the talent deficiency is so great in this game. So I got to go Miami.
All right, Chicago at Minnesota. Here's one of these storylines that are flying. I don't know if it's under the radar, but if the Packers win today, and if the Vikings beat the Bears, the Packers will become the winningest franchise in NFL history with, I think, 786 wins. That is something that has not changed for about 100 years. So it has been said. I do think Minnesota beats Chicago, and well, right now, I mean, the Packers are winning 20-10, although, quick update, 2nd and 10 from the 24-yard line. The Giants are, once again, driving. So that game is certainly not a guarantee for the Packers, but it would just be an interesting little changing of the guard, so to speak, something that hasn't happened in quite some time. But in this game, I do have Minnesota at home beating Chicago because, quite frankly, I don't know if I've seen as inept of an offense as I've seen from Chicago in my life, and I've seen Tim Tebow run offenses in this league. So, yeah, give me Minnesota. And I'm not even a big believer in the Vikings, but against the Bears, absolutely.
Right. I mean, the Bears are, I think, only passing the ball probably 15 to 20 times a game. So, I mean, with that recipe, I just think with the explosive plays Minnesota's getting right now, they're not really going to be able to keep up. So, Vikings win for me.
All right, Pittsburgh at Buffalo. I like Buffalo in this one. Obviously, Kenny Pickett getting another start. Excitement around the rookie quarterback, but the reality of it is Pittsburgh's just not a great team. And Buffalo, despite their flaws, and there's nothing guaranteed about them, I believe are a much better team right now, and I think they're going to have a pretty easy time at home. So give me the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add to that. I think this is kind of a team that you don't expect to maybe stay as close in these games this time around compared to other Mike Tomlin teams. So especially on the road, I think it's just going to be too much, and the Bills pick up the win today.
All right, next we have Houston at Jacksonville. This could be a pretty entertaining game because, like I said before, I do actually kind of like Jacksonville. I think they're finally doing some really positive things, and there's a little bit of hope. Houston, on the other hand, I don't think so. So Jacksonville at home, pretty easy bet for on my part.
Yeah, I would love to know the last time Jacksonville was a touchdown favorite. Maybe have to go back to that special Blake Bortles year, but yeah, I don't really think these two teams are on the same level right now. I think Jaguars defense is actually maybe even more entertaining than their offense. Rookie linebacker Devin Lloyd's been making plays all over the place, and kind of turned into somewhat of a steal late in the first round for them. So I'm going to go Jaguars here.
And it is 20-13 now as the Giants hit a field goal. So yeah, it's getting close there. Maybe we're going to have a nice photo finish in London. That'll be pretty sweet. So next we have San Francisco at Carolina. San Francisco looks pretty good with Jimmy G for the most part. Carolina has not won a game. I don't know, in like 6 seasons or something like that. Give me San Francisco, and I like nothing about Carolina. I don't like their quarterback. I don't like their coach. I don't like their defense. I don't like there's nothing about it. I don't like Christian McCaffrey because, again, I don't know if he's ever going to be out there a full season, and I don't think it is. So, yeah, give me San Francisco like 3 times.
Right. Yeah. I mean, not a whole lot to add. I think most Panthers fans are just waiting on possibly a Matt Rule firing sometime during the season here. We'll see if it happens before their bye week or not. I think they have a pretty late bye week, but yeah, I mean, this one to me is pretty easy. 49ers win today.
All right, next we have Dallas at the Rams. The Rams, again, possibly suffering from some of that Super Bowl hangover. I like Dallas in this one. I mean, I've been wrong. I was wrong with Cooper Rush coming in. I didn't think they were going to have a lot of opportunities to win games, but they have. They've played pretty good football, and I think they're going up against a team that's pretty vulnerable right now in the Rams, and certainly teetering, I guess you want to say. So, give me Dallas on the road.
Yeah, I'm going Dallas as well. I think what's been maybe more surprising to me with the Rams is their defense struggling as much on the back end as it has. Jalen Ramsey's probably given up as much big plays as we've seen in a 3-year span going into the season. So better defense is Dallas, and I think Cooper Rush is his comfort and confidence that he has right now on that offense. The Cowboys are feeding off of that. So I'm going Dallas as well. I'm a little surprised. Maybe not surprised the Rams are favored, but by how much is really surprising to me in this one. I think by 5.5 points. So I got Dallas though in this one.
All right, last game, since we already picked Sunday Night Football. We got Philadelphia at Arizona. Does Philly stay undefeated? I say yes. I don't see any reason why they're not going to beat a Cardinals team that I don't really think is that good. I think the Eagles are well balanced across the board. I don't think they have the best offense or the best defense or the best anything, but I think across the board, right now it's hard pressed to find a team that's playing better football at all 3 levels. So give me the Eagles, and I think it's going to be a pretty comfortable win for them.
Yeah, and Arizona, I don't think they've really played a complete game yet. Both of their wins are kind of, I guess, fraudulent, you would say. I mean, they had a lot of turnovers last week against Carolina, some missed throws from Kyler. So I don't really think they're really capable of keeping up with Philly today. So I'm going to go with the Eagles here.
Well, there you have it. That's our picks. And real quick, I'm going to assume Monday Night Football, we're both taking Kansas City, correct? Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, let's just get that formality over with and just, know that since we aren't on the air tomorrow, we do officially have Kansas City winning against the Raiders. So that's going to do it for us here today. There is no full press fantasy show here this week. Kyle is gallivanting across Canada. I think he's going to some curling matches across the country. I'm not quite sure. Or maybe he's in London cheering on the Packers. I'm not quite sure. But either way, he will not be here, and we will not have our fantasy show. So if you want, go ahead and watch this episode one more time before the start of actually the 1:00 games. But until then, we will be back next Sunday. And, of course, keep an eye out for our Full Press NFL podcast where Tuesday, Braden and I will give our studs and duds for the week. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will talk to you next